Hi everyone, this is Alex Gosse. I'm the owner of Magically Resin, and I'm working in collaboration with Shop Resin Molds to bring you some new ideas for how to use their molds and maybe things you haven't thought of or things you maybe been wanting to try. I am going to be bending resin today, and I'm going to show you how I do this step by step. I start off with my craft resin, equal parts A and B, measured by volume, and I mixed this and I gave it about 10 minutes to degas and also to warm up some. I like my resin to be really warm before I get started doing anything, and also to make sure that there's no bubbles. So I added in a little bit of glitter. I'll have all of the things that I used in the description below, and I really like this glitter. It adds like a nice touch without it doesn't sink like other glitter does, so I particularly like this product. And also I added in just a little bit of black acrylic paint. I like using a combination of acrylic paint and alcohol ink in my pours, and often I will add in a little bit of silicone as well. And I like the tone-on-tone effect. You can add mica to this to even get an additional way of movement, and I really like the way that the resin looks for these types of pieces. But mostly what I wanted today was for my resin to be very opaque, but also have a very black glass feel. So I'm very pleased with how this turned out, but I do this technique all the time with tone-on-tone acrylic paint and alcohol ink. Now I'm adding in some gold alcohol ink that I make myself, but you could absolutely use gold piñata. It works almost the same. I do this to save money because I pour lots and lots and lots of things every day, and it's cheaper for me to mix my own alcohol ink. But it's totally not worth doing it if you don't pour as much stuff as I do. And that's my little silicone bottle that I use pretty much in everything I pour now. I absolutely love the marbleization that this offers, and when you use it in conjunction with really any alcohol ink, it creates a really lovely cell effect. But especially I like it with the gold alcohol ink because the gold alcohol ink floats and the silicone floats, so it creates these beautiful cells on the top of whatever the piece is that you're making. And so very often I want more cells to be on top of whatever it is that I'm doing. You can see I poured multiple pieces here, and the other piece, you see all of those cells. That's from the silicone that I use. So this is my first time pouring this particular mold, but I have 3 other really similar molds that Shop Resin Molds sells 4 different of these same types of molds, but they're a different design, and I find all of them to be fantastic for bending, and I love playing with the different designs that each of these offers. So I was really thrilled to get this one and to be able to start pouring with it. The design is just gorgeous. It's so classy. So some of the silicone parts are lower than the others, so they're going to be embedded in the piece, and then some of them are going to create shapes inside of the piece, which make it possible to bend really easily while it's still in the early stages of curing. I found this star shape at the bottom to be just one of my favorite things about this particular mold, because when I bent it, I could have bent the star shape at the bottom, the part that looks like a snowflake that's mostly filled in right now. I could have bent it as well at the time, but I liked that it sat flat, and especially for the candle votive that I was wrapping it around to get the shape. I really thought that was such a beautiful classic look for it. So I particularly like this mold and how it worked when I bent it. Next, I added in some alcohol ink. Again, it was the alcohol ink that I make myself, but piñata gold would be perfect. Silver would have been great here too. What you want, if you're using an alcohol ink, it needs to be a metallic alcohol ink because they float. So it's really important here. It would have been fine if it sank, but it just would have worked differently. It would have been on the opposite side of the demold, so you have to think about where the ink is going to land depending on which part of the mold you want to show. I wanted this edge to be prominent once I shaped it because I wanted the star to be flat, and then I wanted the bowl edges to be the gold edges that you would see. I decided to add some crystals to the bottom star area before it cured. So after I added the gold alcohol ink, but before it cured, I added some crystals, but I forgot to turn the camera back on. So if you notice that there's color variations in the bottom and it looks bumpy, it's because I added quartz crystals to it. I wanted you to see here in the demold how very soft this still was. So basically, in order to bend resin effectively, there's a couple of things I consider incredibly important. I like using a resin that has a very long cure time. That opens up a longer amount of time that you can bend the resin without it snapping. So a resin with a short cure time leaves just a super short window for bending resin, and very often it snaps, and I don't like that. So I like a resin with a longer cure time, and then you see how soft the resin is. Basically, this was just at the point where if you touched it, you would leave fingerprints, but I wasn't super concerned about that because I was going to correct it after the fact and I was bending. Harder to do with gloves. So you basically want it to be as soft as it can possibly be while still being able to demold it, because you have to be able to demold it. It needs to not be sticky. It can be a little tacky, but it can't be sticky, and it can't still be wet. So find the line with whatever resin you're using where you can touch it, but it doesn't stick to you. So it's cured enough to move is really important, which again, the slower the cure time on your resin, the longer the time is you have that you'll be able to bend it and work with it in this fashion. Also, the shape of this particular mold really lends itself well to bending. So picking your mold wisely for bending is really important. I chose a glass votive to shape this around, and then I left it for 24 hours upside down to let gravity do its thing. I didn't add any additional pressure or anything at all for it to get this shape, and I'm so tickled with how this turned out. I'd like to thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you joining me. I really appreciate Shop Resin Molds giving me the opportunity to make these tutorials. We absolutely love our artists, so please reach out and show us what you're making. Tag us on Instagram, ask us questions, like and share any of our content. And if you have any particular questions about how I made this or any other things that you might like to see, please be sure and leave them here in the comments. Have a fantastic day, everybody.